Welcome to this episode of Off-Road Hub. My name is Ken. Thanks for watching. Today, I am going to replace a tie rod for you, the inner one. If you've been following along, you've seen that I've been bending tie rods, 3 in the last 3 actual days, which is pretty crazy. And for no apparent rhyme or reason, I haven't done anything crazy. So these tie rods on these FJ Cruisers and really any independent front suspension off-road vehicle, they can bend on you when you least expect it, and they can leave you stranded on the trail. So first of all, you should always carry at least one inner and outer tie rod end, and preferably 2. As I demonstrated, you can break 2 at the same time a few videos back. So definitely have the parts and have the tools you need to replace them on the trail. The tools you need for this job are pretty basic. You're going to need a flathead screwdriver, a pair of dikes or wire cutters, a large pair of channel locks, some needle nose pliers, a few wrenches. For this one, we'll need a 15 and a 22. You may need a 24. Some aftermarket tie rods come with a larger jam nut. You're going to need a hammer, and in this case, a wrench with a 19mm socket. Your size may vary, but on the FJ Cruiser, it's 19. And then a tie rod. This is an inner tie rod. Yeah, those are the basic tools you need to replace a tie rod on any independent front suspension vehicle. Here's my inner tie rod that's bent. You can see that it's bowed up a little bit. This tie rod was just installed a few days ago on the trail, and I managed to bend it again somehow. I don't know when it happened, but as I was saying, these things are pretty fragile and they can bend at any time. The first thing you want to do, the very first thing you want to do, is loosen this nut. Break this loose. It could be a challenge depending on how long. Well, I should turn it the right way, that would help. These things can be a real challenge if they've been out a long time. So just break it loose, and then you want to break the tie rod loose from the jam nut. So make sure that these can spin independently of each other. See, the rod and the nut can turn. So you want to make sure those are loose first, because after it's off the vehicle, it's really hard to break those loose. Second, you want to undo this clamp so that it's free. Next, there's a cotter pin through this stud right here, so you got to get that out of there. You just straighten the ends of the cotter pin out and then pull it through. Just like that. The next thing you want to do is there's this clamp holding this boot on right here. There's a clamp right here. You can see this. There's a opening in the clamp right here. Take your little screwdriver and you're gonna stick it in there and just kind of expand that opening, and that'll loosen the clamp up. Don't break the clamp, just loosen the clamp, because you're gonna reuse that clamp. And then grab the boot and pull it, and it should pull back, exposing the inside of the inner tie rod. What you want to do next is take your wrench with your 19mm socket on it, and we're going to make sure we're turning it in the right direction. And we're going to take this nut off. Now, to release this stud from the knuckle, you're going to hit the knuckle right here. Do not pound on the top of this stud because you will destroy the threads. So hit it here and this will pop out. You can hit it on top of this stud if you have if you're replacing the outer tie rod end, but if you don't want to replace the outer tie rod end, then I don't recommend destroying those threads. Just like that. Next, we're actually going to remove the inner tie rod from the steering rack, and you can see on the new one, it's just threaded in there. So there is a specialized tool for doing this that you would use in a shop, but we're not in a shop. We're out in the middle of nowhere, and so we're just going to use some big channel locks. And we're going to grab right here, and it's lefty-loosey, just like almost any threaded thing in the United States. And you're just going to give it a twist. After you break it loose, you should be able to just twist it with your hand. And there you have it. So, with the old tie rod out, we just need to get this outer tie rod end off of the inner tie rod end. And since we broke it loose earlier, we can take this off of here. Count your turns so that you know about how far to put it onto the new tie rod. So with the FJ Cruiser, I know that it's about 17 or 18 turns onto the new inner tie rod, and that'll give me about the right length. You're gonna need this jam nut to come off of here so that you can get the boot and this clamp off of the old inner tie rod. So pull your clamp off that you'll reuse, and your boot off that you will reuse. And here's the old bent tie rod. It's not extremely bent, but it doesn't take much to screw up your steering. Okay, what you want to do now is get your inner tie rod installed in your rack, and you're just gonna thread that in righty-tighty, being sure not to cross thread it. Now you should put red Loctite on these threads, but I anticipate having to replace this again soon enough, and I don't drive my FJ on the road very much, and I don't have any red thread lock, so I'm not going to use any. But you should put red thread lock on those threads so that this doesn't come loose. But I don't think it's going to come loose for me, so that's just me. Take your channel locks, tighten that up so that it's pretty darn tight. All right, and then slide your boot back on and get it over the rack. Get the outside in position right here. It'll kind of lock into place. And then slide that into place. All right, the boot is in place, and we've got to reclamp that clamp that we expanded with the screwdriver. And you do that with these wire cutters like this, because you're just going to squeeze this, and that is going to just crimp it down nice so that that clamp is reclamped. Next, you can get this little outer boot clamp back into place. That's simple. And then put on your outer tie rod end. And on the FJ Cruiser, it's 17 or 18 turns. That'll get you back to about what you need to be for, well, it'll get you close to where you need to be alignment-wise. So, let's see here, get it started. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 17 turns. Bring our nut back up there. And then we got to get this stud back up into the knuckle. And our wheel is not attached to anything, so we can turn it by hand. It might take some force. Well, quite a bit of force, actually. Oh, it started it, so we can get our nut on the top threads there. And just take your wrench and it should just pull it in. And you want to tighten that down, again, pretty darn tight. One thing, you need to align the hole in that stud with your castle nut so that you can get your cotter pin in there. Looks like we need to go just a little bit tighter. And you always want to go tighter. Don't loosen it to get your cotter pin lined up, because you don't want to be loosening it. Stick your cotter pin in there, and then just bend the ends out so that it doesn't fall out. There you go. End is bent, so it's not gonna fall out. There's really no magic to cotter pins. They're doing them a special way. You're just bending them so they can't come back through the hole. That's it. All right, and then our final step is just tightening down this lock nut. Make sure you hold the rod, the tie rod, with your 15mm wrench, and then tighten this nut down without letting the rod turn, because that'll change how far into the outer tie rod it is, changing your alignment. Tighten that down pretty darn tight, and there you have it. We replaced the tie rod with a new one, and you're ready to hit the trail again. Now, after doing a trail repair like this, you will have to go get an alignment at a shop so that you don't wear out your tires, because the toe that you set by counting the number of threads, it will not be perfect, but it'll get you off the trail, and it's not going to hurt your tires driving in the dirt and getting off the trail and getting it to a shop. So there you have it. It's a pretty simple procedure. It doesn't take a lot of time. So if you bend a tie rod on the trail, it's not that big a deal, as long as you've got the parts and the tools to replace it. Now, make sure you have outer tie rods, because when that inner tie rod bends a lot, it can force that outer tie rod, that ball joint on that tie rod, to separate. So there's a good chance you'll need an outer too. Carry 2 inners and 2 outers, and all the tools I outlined here, and you'll be all set. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this. Hopefully this helps. I mean, hopefully you don't have to do this on the trail ever, but in case you do, I hope it helps. If you liked it, give me a like and subscribe so I can share new content with you every Monday and Thursday, and we'll see you next time.